Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne, and this is episode 40. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Rock is George podcast, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, your favorite streaming platform, or at rockisgeorge.com. My guest for episode 40 is the Lone Wolf, Tommy Vext. Tommy got his start with the heavy metal band Bad Wolves back in 2017. You may remember their cover of the Cranberries' 1994 song Zombie. It was all over the radio, all over TV, all over everywhere. Tommy departed Bad Wolves last year to start his solo career, although there is some controversy on how everything went down. But we're here today to talk about Tommy's solo music. He has a new album coming out called Grand Theft Audio. He has a new single out. As of the recording of this podcast, that single was Trust the Science. The latest single is Cancel the King. So here's the Lone Wolf, Tommy Vext. If I knew absolutely nothing about the Lone Wolf, how would you describe your music to me?
It's all the good Bad Wolf songs that didn't make the new Bad Wolves record. I don't know. I think there were two writing partners in that band as it was, and so the songs that you hear on the radio, most of that stuff is like it's me and Drew Folk and me and Joseph McQueen, or I write with different songwriters trying to get my life stories out, and they just turned out to kind of be number one hits. So it's going to be more of that, and then it's going to be some everything that people would expect from me. I think this record it's called Grand Theft Audio, and for obvious reasons. And I fought like hell to get ownership of it back, and I'm really proud of it. And we've released the first single, and it's already no stranger to controversy. So,
I would describe your music sort of like a modern version of nu metal. That's what I grew up with in the 90s. So I would akin it to that. And certainly your new single, Trust the Science, has sort of that nu metal vibe. You got the hard rock guitars, you got the rap.
When I wrote the song, I knew I wanted to have a rapper, like I wanted to have a guest voice on that. And I've been a fan of Topher's for a couple years, and he had a huge number one song with the song The Patriot, and he's former military, so that's right up my alley, and we'd become fast friends through Instagram, and we were trying to work together for a long time, but I was previously on a record label and couldn't do anything, right? I was like completely handcuffed to the wall. So when all that stuff ended, I was like, hey, I have this track, and I already sang my parts, and I sent it over, and I'm like, I don't know if he's gonna, how he's gonna respond to it. And then he fired back with the verses, and I was like, he went harder than I did, and I was like, oh, all right, cool. So that song, it's open to interpretation, but the real reality of the inspiration by why the song came to fruition was the final straw in the COVID drama was when they fired the nurses and doctors who didn't want to get jabbed. At this point, I'm like, okay, all these people who put their lives in jeopardy in 2020, in the beginning of the pandemic, they could have died. None of us knew what was going to happen. We just knew that people were sick and dying, and you see like the videos from China of people like tipping over in the street and spitting out blood. And we're like, they're literally sending out nurses and doctors and EMTs and firemen and police first responders to deal with this. In 2020, they were heroes. And then 18 months later, they were fired if they didn't want to take an experimental drug, which we now know the efficacy, it was a failure. Do they get their jobs back? Can they get back pay? Like, it's just so unconstitutional to me, So no matter what your belief systems are, I think there's just like we're at the point of, politicians and corporations absolutely have to be accountable for what they did to the American working people.
Are you getting a lot of negative pushback from the single, or are you getting positive?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. Like if you look, we're living in two worlds. And as a former multi-platinum selling artist in the machine, there is the industry, and the industry is like very hive-minded. And they basically are controlled and told what to think, what to do, what to say. and that's the mainstream industry. And then there's the fans and the people. And in the middle of it are the artists. You know, most of the artists have been bullied into being silent. I think people like Aaron Lewis, I think Kid Rock, you know, obviously me, you know, at any expense, I said and did what I always thought was the truth, because I didn't like what I was seeing. And I had a pretty extensive understanding, to the best of the ability. Like, nobody could know exactly 100% of anything that was going on because there's been so much confusion. But I think that the music industry is completely detached from the reality of what the audience thinks and feels. You know, the song debuted at #2 on iTunes behind Tool. And then, you know, we got the Billboard charts last week, and I was the #5 most not streamed, purchased song in the whole genre. So
well, I think that speaks volumes as far as fan support. I think a lot of the industry before the last 2 years, I think a lot of the industry didn't really have their thumb on what was hot, or they thought that they could make what was hot. Because I mean, I grew up in the time where the guys like Toto and Chicago and Foreigner were the thing, and then the 80s hair metal bands came in, and then the new metal bands came in, but then they kind of all got pushed over for more Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, and all that other stuff. So I think from beyond the last 2 years, the industry doesn't really know what the people want, and you know, sales obviously would tell them.
Well, I think that's also, I think there's a couple of indicators, right? It's not so much that they don't know. I think they don't care. And I think that these people feel entitled to enforce what they think should be onto the audience. And that's never what rock has been about. Frank Zappa talks about in an interview in probably the late 90s, early 2000s. And he said, you know, back in the day, the old guys, they didn't know what was going to work. And they'd sit around and smoke their cigars, and they'd be like, throw money at it. We'll see if it sticks. That kind of method, you know, that's the spaghetti, throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks method, was a high risk, but more organic. And it's how you had more authentic rock stars and like superstars, you know what I mean? That's how things like Elvis were built, and the Beatles, because there would be a bunch of different artists at the time, and they like didn't know what was going to stick. So they threw the kitchen sink at it. The strongest survived. Now, the children of those old guys grew up, and they want to learn how to manipulate and control. They want more control over what people's perceptions are. And I think they see the internet, they see, you know, big tech doing it, and they feel like they want to be in that race, and they want to be in that game and controlling what people think and feel. And as an artist, my thing is being connected to humanity and being connected to people is what's going to make me a songwriter that talks about and expresses things that the greater human consciousness is experiencing. And with everything that was going on in the past 2 years, how could you not talk about it? How could you not do anything about it? And you know, you see these bands, every band on the iTunes charts that I looked at when we were up there, there were no new bands. It was Tool, it was me, it was Nirvana, you know, because it was Nirvana just had a song in the Batman movie, so young people are all discovering it, and people are falling in love with it again. And Thunderstruck, the live version of Thunderstruck by AC/DC, which was also placed in the show. The problem is that there's no new rock bands that are saying anything relevant, period, because the industry has shut it out. You know, and all these, like Topher is another hip hop artist, like, you know, they call him a TikTok star, but it's like the reality is he's a platinum selling hip hop artist with no record label, no promotion, and he's talking about things to the you know, that they don't want rappers talking about to the Black community. Like, why are we not allowed to question anything anymore? You know, and like for punk rockers and metalheads and you know, it's the weirdest thing. Like, you know, I saw bands like Rage Against the Machine mandating masks and vaccines at their concerts when their tickets are goddamn $1,000 to go see. I'm like, dude, you guys are literally like anti-capitalism and everybody should be equal and everyone should be free to express themselves, but they have to wear a mask and spend $1,000 on a ticket to go see. Like, it's the most insane shit. Like, Rage Against the Machine has become raging on behalf of the machine. It's painful to watch, dude. It's painful. I watched all my heroes turn into pussy ass bitches over 2020. A lot of people criticize me because I voted for Trump and I talked about it. But I'm like, the last time I checked, it's a free country and you can agree or disagree, and that shouldn't be a thing, right? You shouldn't get canceled for who you vote for.
You're scheduled to release a new song every first Friday of the month leading up to your new album, Grand Theft Audio. Are these songs all going to be in the same vein as Trust the Science? Or are you going to tackle other issues?
There's plenty of things to talk about. I think the next song is going to be called Cancel the King, which obviously is self-explanatory. It's like it goes in after what cancel culture is and what a joke it is, and it's an unsustainable culture. I'm not exactly sure on what the third and fourth singles, but there's, I have a song called Strong for Someone Else that is going to be a big push for. That's an anti-suicide, mental health awareness song. A lot of people, obviously people who have been to any Bad Wolf show that I've done know that for years I've been talking about, I'm an attempted suicide survivor. And I've done a lot of outreach stuff and talk, anytime that I can talk to people or be of service to people to help them get through those lows in their life. Because a lot more people experience this stuff than don't. And I think that by destigmatizing it and the more that we talk about it, and especially as men, I feel like men are not allowed to admit this. At least I felt like that when I was going through it. And so, I want to be a voice for change. And I want to say, hey, like, I went through this too. It doesn't make you weak for acknowledging it. And it doesn't make you weak to ask for help. There's been times where in my life, things were really bad and somebody else had it worse than me, and me helping them save my own ass. And I think that's what we're really meant here to do on this planet. Is I think we've lost sight of the fact that we're here to be of service to each other, and that life is kind of a day at a time thing, and we get distracted with with politics like I just did, and we get distracted with getting to the finish line or having enough money or when it's going to be like this. Like, we tell ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when this happens. And so many people are invested in the idea of the pursuit of happiness that we forget to learn how to have happiness within the pursuit, because some of the best times of our life are going to be while we're chasing the dream. My heart hurts for the people who want to hurt themselves because they feel like things can't get better. Willingness is the key, and I think about if I would have killed myself years ago, I would have been killing the wrong guy. All the things I would have never got to see and do, all the people whose lives I would have never touched, all the people whose lives touched mine. When it comes to that stuff, I know that the suicide rate since COVID it's gone up astronomically, and also the overdose rate too. So we're talking about, the opioid crisis. More people died of opioids the past couple of years than they did in the Vietnam War on both sides of the war. If those were like flu numbers, they'd be considered a pandemic. And so we have an epidemic in this country of, fentanyl overdose and opioid abuse, and people are afraid and they want to numb themselves. They feel overwhelmed. They're financially afraid. And not to make it political, but I think that the solutions that government are providing, especially now, by like giving people crack pipes and needles and stuff. And I've been sober for 13 years. I was homeless. That's not helping anyone. It's going to kill them because you are enabling them, and this is the thing we learned in Al-Anon too, because I'm what they call a double winner, because I'm an addict, but I also have loved ones who are addicts and alcoholics. So, when we continue to enable a drug addict or an alcoholic to abuse drugs and alcohol, we're giving them a slow death sentence. the money that's being pumped into these ridiculous programs could be going into opening up, Salvation Army spots or different kinds of rehab facilities where when the patients graduate from the facility, they can become employed by this facility. So, you know what I mean? So they can be off the street. And I've worked in treatment for 8 or 9 years of my recovery out of 13 years. Like, I know how this works. I've seen the miracles happen.
Did you bring God into your life after your suicide attempt or after you started recovery?
I found God in early recovery. When I got sober, they told me, it could be a God of your own understanding. So, it just started with, nature and the ocean, and it's evolved, since then. And then I've had some experiences that kind of brought me back to church, and I've been exploring, reconnecting with Christianity again. I grew up in a Lutheran church. And then I had bad experiences with people who supposedly represented Christianity. And like a lot of young punk metal people, I was like, fuck this. I went away from that for a very long time. I in the past couple of years, I got reintroduced. It's something I haven't really talked about. There's a weird thing in Hollywood where you're not allowed to talk about God. Which I don't, because they you don't want to offend anybody. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, how is that? I don't know why that would be offensive. So yeah, I've just kind of been in a place of the past couple, even I think intentionally this year, my intent was because I've been working and working and working and fighting and fighting and fighting and working, that finally, after the holidays, I just decided I was going to really dig deep and focus on forgiveness, because I needed to really send love to people who did me wrong so that we weren't connected anymore. And I needed to break the chains of the resentments and stuff. And the only way to really do that is to actually, pray for people. There's songs about my spirit, the spiritual journey on the record too, of I want peace as much as I can possibly have, and considering the current affairs of the world, but I want peace in my life. And that includes relinquishment of attachment to people who I feel slighted me. This is another thing we don't talk about, is when we hold on to grudges, or when we try to get even, we get even worse. And it corrodes the fabric of our spiritual lives. And we don't get to move on into more positive things because we're still, oh, they did this. It's the understanding for me is in a lot of this stuff is that people are scared and afraid do things that are what people who are scared and afraid do. And most people are when they get confronted with things that make them uncomfortable, they're either afraid they're going to lose what they have, or they're not going to get what they want. I did this meditation thing where I hugged everybody who I was really upset with. And I was like, hey, I love you. And I was like, I'll see you around. I did that for pretty much a whole week every morning with my friend who's a guided meditation teacher. I felt like I lost 100 pounds.
Well, let me ask you this in relation to everything that we've talked to up to this point, barring music. Do you think that the internet and social media and media in general creates this picture of the world that's not really happening?
I've never had anybody over my 20-year career have a problem with the color of my skin. And I make music. I've been in diehard extreme death metal bands, punk rock bands, rap metal bands, anything you can think of. It hasn't happened. And obviously, my experience is that, people are going to be prejudiced, or some people are going to be racist. Yeah, but there's more trans people than white supremacists. And that's 0.7 of the percentage of the population. It's I'm not really concerned about the white supremacists that carry tiki torches and live in trailer parks. That I'm concerned about the real white supremacists that are the problem, which are the globalists who have billions and trillions of dollars and have a vision for where they want the world to go.
Last year, you released a free album to your fans. It was called Uncovered. It was a collection of covers music. This must have been fun for you.
that record was held up. The release of that was held up for like 11 months. So during COVID, I went in the studio and I recorded like 40 songs, some original and like 20 covers, pretty much half and half, because everyone was terrified we weren't going to tour. They're like, what are we going to do? We have no money. And I'm a hustler. I have multiple revenue streams. Like I just have so many hustles. Like, because I grew up so poor, I never want to be in a situation where I'm like, I can't eat. You know what I mean? And I've been homeless. And so, I never stopped working. So as I was the owner of the company, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm like, all right. I was like, I'll start a Patreon. So I basically started a Patreon and went in the studio, and every week I would record one original and one cover. And then I would shoot a video of the cover in the studio on my iPhone and post it on the Patreon. And it wound up making about $30,000 a month. So I got to make sure that the whole band and crew stayed on salary. So I literally paid for the recordings, hired Max, the ghostwriter, to come in and do the songs, hired, my producer to come into work, and we would work 2 days a week. And then we would drop a song once a week. The fans loved it because they were getting stuff that was unreleased. Yeah, nobody, all of 2020, the whole time I was in the band, no one in the band missed a payment. They didn't miss they didn't miss rent. They didn't miss car payments, no insurance payments, nothing, because I basically figured everything out to a way that it was, I like to create solutions. That's why I like that the most. I do. So anyway, when I left, part of the agreement was I would get all my recordings. And so I did a GoFundMe in January of 2021 when everything was on good terms and we had just mutually agreed to split. And it raised like $192,000. And then that became the that ultimately, I think, became the problem. I think that people on the other side saw how much support I had and then got mad, and then they actually had a legal team shut down my GoFundMe. And it just started to be, that's when all the drama started.
Are you going to be able to get out and tour on your current material?
So we're putting together a tour with Adelita's Way for this summer. I think it'll either start in July or August. And then I have calls this week about going to UK and Europe. Hopefully things are chill over there it seems like Zelensky and Putin are figuring it out. I'm hoping it doesn't escalate, and nobody wants that. It's completely unnecessary at this point, and I have fans in Russia and Ukraine because Zombie was a huge hit over there. And so, I had them they all were messaging me that they were going to get kicked off Instagram and Facebook. So I had to join a Russian social media page, and I got all these fans, and they're from both countries, and they're like, this is stupid. It's none of the people want this, and I don't think Americans want it. Only the rich people want it. Only the billionaires are because they're like, oh, we can make money off this. And well, you can see stock go up. Everybody, all the politicians I monitor Nancy Pelosi stocks and all these people, because you could see where they're going.
Right.
So they went from Johnson and Johnson and Moderna and Pfizer to Lockheed Martin and what I mean, defense contractors. I'm like, dude, they were gearing up for this. They want this to happen. It's deplorable.
Despite all the negative stuff that's happened over the last couple of years, there's got to be some relief that you feel being able to produce and release your music on your own now.
Quite frankly, it's like getting out of an abusive relationship. You don't even really, when it's finally over, you don't even understand. You're so gaslit and so fucked with and so mentally and emotionally drained. You don't even know what happened. When you go against people that have the financial ability to do this, they literally torture you. So I understand. I used to not like Kanye West. And I watched this documentary recently on Netflix, and dude, I understand what they did to that man. You know, they basically try to make you insane. They try to drive you crazy. They study who you are. They know what's important to you, and they attack you in your most vulnerable place. And each person is different. And then when you react, you look like you're crazy, but it's because behind the scenes, you can't see what these people are doing to your family, to your friends, to your personal life, to your means of income. There are certain people in Hollywood who are in this special club, and they have a protocol of what to do to defectors. You know, it's not, they've done it to tons of people. I look at like Corey Feldman. Did they ruin that guy's life? You know, they pushed him to the point where he actually is kind of like not really okay anymore. You know, Hollywood's been engaging in psychological warfare on a minute scale for ever. You know, it's how they maintain an air of control. You know, they don't, because most of these people are like Harvey Weinstein. This is what these kinds of people are, and so they don't want to get caught out there. So they have to maintain absolute control at all times. And so I think getting away from that is like, you know, there's a lot of processing to do. You know, there's a lot of, you know, for example, like I could sign with another label. I just don't trust it, you know? And so part of me putting out my own stuff and doing it myself is, I'm like, do I even need these people? You know, because the first single, I'm like, it's not even a single, it's a street track. You know, it's not meant to be a radio song. And so if I'm selling to the point of that, I'm charting that like that without any help, well, what do I need what help do I need? There are bands who are doing their own thing who, like, they're not like, you know, you don't see them on the marquee, like you don't see them all over the place. And these dudes are multi-millionaires. And then you see these big, huge bands, and I know these people are broke. You know, so do you want to be wealthy, or do you want to be famous? I don't give a shit about being famous. I care about taking care of my family. I care about putting out artwork that has integrity.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast, and wish you the best of luck with the new album coming out and the current singles that are ahead of you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you soon, man.
Once again, I want to thank Tommy Vext for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be on the lookout for his upcoming album, Grand Theft Audio. If you like what you hear, make sure you buy a physical copy, support the artist. For all things Tommy Vext, check out TommyVextOfficial.com. I also want to thank Shauna O'Donnell of O'Donnell Media Group for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. I'll see you again soon.